In the previous lecture, I covered the pharmacological management of anxiety related disorders and insomnia. Today, in this lecture, I would cover antidepressants, the various class of medicines or pharmacological agents that are used for treating or managing the condition of depression. The antidepressants were used to treat major depression, mild depression, moderate depressions, and the earlier classes of antidepressant included tricyclic antidepressants and MAO inhibitors. But in 1987-88, fluoxetine was introduced, and this was a type of miracle medicines when this was introduced, and it gained wide popularity in the treatment of antidepressants. But before that, the antidepressants used for treating or managing depression included tricyclic antidepressants and MAO inhibitors. There are several types of antidepressants available today, but for ease of understanding, I would like to classify them in two broader categories: the earlier ones, the older ones, and the newer agents. And in both categories, there are several classes, and I will discuss those classes and classifications because that will take little longer. So before going to the classification of the various antidepressants and their use, mode of action, etc., I would first prefer to cover the indications for what antidepressants are used. And as I said earlier, the primary indication of all these medicines is moderate to severe depression. However, some of these medicines have been used for other purpose also. For example, amitriptyline is used in pain management. So various chronic pain patients have been found to respond with use of amitriptyline, but it is used in subclinical dose. Generally 10 mg to 25 mg of amitriptyline is used for managing treatment. But for managing depression, the dose is little higher. Similarly, imipramine has also been used as panicolytic, so managing the panic disorders. Imipramine is also used for treating enuresis or bedwetting in children. I will come to that. And clomipramine has been used for treating OCD when SSRI were not introduced. Similarly, the SSRIs, when introduced in 1987-88, they are used as anxiolytic because they have been found not to respond to the symptoms of depressions only, but to the signs and symptoms of anxiety as well as OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, that I have covered in the management of anxiety related disorders in my previous lecture. So these medicines, though primarily meant for treating depression, moderate to severe depression, they can be used for other types of conditions, medical conditions, and psychological conditions also. So, taken together, the indications of antidepressants may include anxiety. For example, I discussed in my previous lecture, and in this also, that SSRI and some in tricyclic antidepressants like trazodone can be used. Panic attack, obsessive compulsive disorder, these medicines have been found to work. But some selected medicines, not all antidepressants are prescribed for all these conditions. Similarly, for treating social anxiety or social phobia, this antidepressant can be used. Post traumatic stress disorder patients have also been prescribed antidepressant depending on their signs, symptoms, and clinical picture. Bulimia, anorexia nervosa, these are eating disorders, and for this also antidepressants are prescribed. Body dysmorphic disorders patients also respond to antidepressants. Premenstrual dysphoria has also been managed using use of these antidepressants, some of the antidepressants. And as I discussed earlier, childhood disorders may also be treated by antidepressant, and two conditions include NRSS, that is bedwetting, and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now come to the classification. The older or the earlier ones and the newer classes. The older ones can be divided into three categories: tricyclic antidepressants, heterocyclic antidepressants, and atypical. And the new one can be classified into SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and atypical. When I am saying atypical, in previous lectures also I mentioned that the mode of action is not well known. It is not specifically known. So these atypical medicines work on different mechanisms. They influence different biological parameters, and how actually they produce the antidepressant effects is not well known. In the older ones, the tricyclic antidepressant was the most widely used antidepressant at a time. And even today, these tricyclic antidepressants are used under some conditions. The tricyclic antidepressants can be classified into two categories: the tertiary amines and secondary amines. So, the tertiary amines include such medicines or such generic medicines like imipramine, doxepin, amitriptyline, clomipramine, timipramine, and in secondary amines, the salts are nortriptyline, protriptyline, desipramine. So the tricyclic antidepressant are of two types: the tertiary amines and secondary amines, and these are the examples that I have explained. Now, both groups of medicines, whether they are secondary amines or tertiary amines, all these medicines they have anticholinergic effects. For example, blurred vision, dry mouth, postural hypertension, weight gain. These are some of the indicators of the anticholinergic effects. And they also produce sedative effects and may be lethal in overdose. But the secondary amines have fewer such side effects compared to the tertiary ones. Now come to the mode of action. The tricyclic antidepressants basically block the presynaptic reuptake of norepinephrine and serotonin to different degrees. And the antidepressant effect is assumed to occur because of this inhibition of the reuptake of norepinephrine and serotonin. Before I proceed to the next slide, in brief, I would like to tell the biological etiology or biological theory behind depression because psychiatric medicines are based on biological model of the psychopathology. As you all know that some neurotransmitters, particularly serotonin and norepinephrine, they are implicated in the genesis of depression. The serotonin theory says that when in the synaptic cleft where the two synapses are meeting, there is a gap between the two synapses. That gap is called synaptic cleft. And the serotonin is released in that synaptic cleft. But if the serotonin is again taken back by the neuron which has released those serotonin from the terminal buttons, then the actual amount of serotonin in the synaptic cleft will be less. So many researchers believe that lower level of serotonin in the synaptic cleft is the main reason behind depression, the biological reason behind depression. But this theory was discarded by many because the serotonin inhibitors or norepinephrine inhibitors, they generally take 3 to 4 weeks to show its clinical effect. But the reuptake the blocking of reuptake starts immediately after taking the medicines, and the level of serotonin increases in the synaptic cleft. So, alternative theory were proposed that probably it is not the level of serotonin, but something else might be there because of which these medicines are working. And studies showed that these medicines change the receptor sensitivity, receptor density, in fact. The receptors sensitive for serotonin, their density is increased. So, more serotonin is used by those receptor sites, and therefore, increased serotonin density is or decreased serotonin density is the reason for depression. And when we increase the serotonin density, then depression is elevated. And generally, this biological change, the change in density of the serotonin receptors, take 3 to 4 weeks of time. So, this theory seems more plausible, but both theories are there in existence. So, any medicine which will increase the amount of serotonin and norepinephrine in the synaptic cleft by any mechanism is assumed to have antidepressant effect. One mechanism by which serotonin is depleted in the synaptic cleft is the reuptake. If the terminal buttons are releasing serotonin and then again taking back, then naturally the level of serotonin will be. Another mechanism by which serotonin and norepinephrine may become low in the synaptic cleft, that if some chemical agents are other than these neurotransmitters are released in the synaptic cleft and they degrade the serotonin and norepinephrine, they break the serotonin norepinephrine in different chemicals, then the actual presence of serotonin and norepinephrine will decrease. When I will discuss MAO inhibitors, then I will again try to recall this theory because MAO inhibitors basically work by blocking this breaking down of the serotonin and norepinephrine. So, in sum, the antidepressants, most of the antidepressants, they work by increasing this serotonin, norepinephrine, and tricyclic antidepressants are assumed to increase this serotonin and norepinephrine by inhibiting or blocking the presynaptic reuptake of these neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft. Now let us discuss what are the advantages and disadvantages of TCAs. Problem with tertiary amines are difficulty to tolerate at even subtherapeutic dose. So they are not easily tolerated by the patients or the clients. Generally, therefore, the tertiary amines are started in a lower dose and then gradually it is increased so that patients can easily tolerate it. The another problem or difficulty with use of tertiary amines TCAs are a strong anticholinergic effect that I have discussed, blurred vision, dry mouth, etc., and a strong sedation effect. And if one is taking the overdose of these medicines, then they may be lethal. And because of these difficulties, TCAs are fallen out of favor. They are less prescribed. However, still they are used under two conditions. First, when low cost treatment is required, particularly in Western countries, the cost of tricyclic antidepressant is lower than the newer classes, and therefore, those who cannot afford those costly medicines they can be treated with low cost tricyclic antidepressant. And second reason is that if there is a genetic predisposition to respond to TCA. For example, if any family member was having a history of depression and he or she responded better to the tricyclic antidepressant, then generally the practitioners prefer to prescribe TCAs because of that genetic predisposition. Otherwise, because of the difficulty that I have just mentioned, like strong cholinergic effect, difficulty in tolerating, these conditions have reduced the likelihood of prescription of these medicines for managing depression. Now, come to I mentioned three categories: the tricyclic antidepressant in older class, heterocyclic antidepressant, and atypical. Now, heterocyclic antidepressant, these cycles are the different rings. So, if there are three rings involved in the salt, then that is called tricyclic. So, heterocyclic agents include non tricyclics. And if I am saying non tricyclic, then it may include bicyclic, monocyclic, tetracyclic, having four cycles, four rings. So, such medicines have been clubbed together and are referred to as heterocyclic agents. Some examples include, for example, ludiumel. This is a heterocyclic antidepressant used for managing depression. Another one is amoxapine. It is generally used in psychotic depression having some psychotic symptoms, and it has antidepressant as well as dopamine blocking property. And like other neuroleptics, EPS is less likely with this medicine, and therefore rather than prescribing antidepressant and some psychotic medicines, many prefer use of amoxapine or similar heterocyclic agents which respond to psychotic depression also. Trazodone is also the heterocyclic antidepressant and it is having very high sedation and fewer anticholinergic effect. And therefore, in my previous lecture, I mentioned that for treating insomnia and even anxiety, the trazodone may be used in subclinical dose to treat these conditions because of the issues and problems associated with benzodiazepines, particularly its addiction potential. Now, the third class is atypical, and in older class, atypical antidepressant includes MAO inhibitors. monoamine oxidase inhibitors. So again, I would recall the theory that when monoamine oxidase is released in the synaptic cleft, it breaks down the serotonin, norepinephrine, and therefore the level of serotonin, norepinephrine become less available in the synaptic cleft, and it is assumed to be related with depression. So any medicine which will inhibit the release of monoamine oxidase in the synaptic cleft will stop this breakdown and therefore will result in higher levels of serotonin, norepinephrine. So most widely prescribed agent is ipromazine, but it is liver toxic, therefore it was discarded very soon. Presently, three newer MAO inhibitors are used, which are clubbed under category non-hydrazine monoamine oxidase inhibitors and includes tranylcypamine, hydrazine, and phenelzine. MAO inhibitors are not the first line treatment. They are not prescribed first for treating antidepressant. They are generally used when the depression is treatment resistant. So, or if the depression is atypical depression. So, under these two conditions, the MAO inhibitors are used. Otherwise, the other antidepressants like tricyclic, heterocyclic antidepressants are used. There is a lot of problem or difficulty in prescribing MAO inhibitors, and I would also discuss how they act. One of the issue is that a lot of precaution is required in administration. First is the washout period. If the patient is on some other antidepressant, you cannot simultaneously administer MAO inhibitors. You will have to wait for a period when the trace of that medicine is completely washed out from the body. And this washout period is generally longer. So when switching to MAO inhibitors, the washout period becomes a issue or problem. And as there are many antidepressants whose half-life is very high, particularly of SSRIs, then washout period may be very high, even up to 3 weeks. Another issue is that MAO inhibitors are having interaction with various medicines. So one has to be very cautious. One should know the history of medicine taken by the patient because many medicines can have considerable interaction with MAO inhibitors. And even MAO inhibitors have been found to show significant interactions with various dietary habits, various diets, and therefore dietary restrictions are also imposed. And these difficulties are major concern for prescribing MAO inhibitors. Now come to the mode of action, how they act. As I discussed in the beginning, MAO inhibitors inhibit the activity of monoamine oxidase, and as a result, it decreases the breakdown of three neurotransmitters in the synaptic cleft: the dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine. So, if we inhibit or block the release of monoamine oxidase, it will increase dopamine, which also induces pleasure. It is related with pleasure. And serotonin and norepinephrine that has been widely implicated in depression, and therefore it works as antidepressant. And the final outcome is the increase in the amount of these neurotransmitter available for release and synaptic transmissions. Now come to the newer class. In newer class, I said that there are two categories. One is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, and the other is atypical. Under atypical, there are different medicines that I will discuss. Some examples of SSRI, again, here is a typo error SSI, it is SSRI. In current use is fluoxetine, these are the generic name, sertraline, proxetine, fluoxetine, escitalopram. These are some examples. There are many, many more in the list. These medicines are generally prescribed for antidepressant and they are having fewer side effects that are associated with heterocyclic and tricyclic antidepressants. Even they are not having sedative effect. But there are some issues. The teratogenicity rating of these medicines is high. For example, the teratogenicity rating is the rating how far the medicines, any medicine that impairs the embryonic development, the development of the fetus. And these ratings are generally classified as A, B, C, D, and X. So A is almost safe. For B, some minor evidences are there, so B is also okay. C, animal studies have demonstrated some adverse effect, but in human clinical trial on women, still it has to be established. But D, it is having known, demonstrated, documented teratogenicity, and X is having various with very severe teratogenicity. So, fortunately, the teratogenicity rating is not that high, but precautions should be taken when prescribing the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors to women when they are pregnant. There are some advantages of SSRI over the antidepressant that I have just discussed, that is tricyclic antidepressant and now inhibitors. First, they are less anticholinergic side effects, having less anticholinergic side effects. That is, blurred vision, weight gain, these side effects will be less in with SSRI. They are having less sedative effect or no sedative effect. So, after taking this medicine, you will not feel drowsy, sleepy because of the medicine, because of alleviation of the removal of the symptom of depression. You may, if insomnia or sleeplessness is one of the symptom of depression, then as the medicine you lack, you will get good sleep. But it is not because of the sedative effect. It is because of the removal of the symptom of depression. But as such, the SSRIs have no sedative or less sedative effect. They are extremely safe in overdose and generally they have a long half-life. In one sense, it is advantage because if patient skips the dose of the medicine, the effect of antidepressant continues. But in some cases, it is disadvantage. For example, when switching to MAO inhibitors. So if the half-life will be long, the washout period will be longer and therefore one will have to wait. Longer half-life medicines include fluoxetine, sertraline and paroxetine half-life are 1 day and fluoxamine half-life is less than 1 day. And another advantage is that generally they are not cardiotoxics. So these are some of the advantages of the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors over tricyclic antidepressants and the earlier older class of antidepressant. But it does not mean that SSRI do not have any side effect. One side effect of SSRI is the induction of non-migraine type headache. Many patients report after taking this medicine a non-migraine type of headache. Gastrointestinal distress, including upset stomach, diarrhea, they are very common with use of SSRI. Similarly, agitation syndrome or activation syndrome characterized by high level of anxiety, agitation, and insomnia is also a likely side effect of use of SSRI. And sexual dysfunction is also reported with the use of SSRI. Sometimes many of the SSRIs they decrease the libido, and some of the medicines they delay the orgasm, and therefore some medicines in this class SSRI they have been used particularly for male for premature ejaculation because of this side effect. So this side effect has been taken as a main effect, the therapeutic effect for treating premature ejaculation. But these are some of the side effects associated with SSRI. Now, in the newer class, other than SSRI, there are certain atypical agents. And again, I would reiterate that atypical means the mode of action is not known. There may be several mode of actions associated with this. Such atypical agents include DNRI, dopamine norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, SNRIs, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, and mixed reuptake inhibitors. And in atypical agents, MAO inhibitors are also included, but they are the older ones, and I have discussed MAO inhibitors earlier. So I will discuss only the newer atypical agents here. In DNRI, there are various medicines used. One medicine is bupropion, and this is basically dopamine norepinephrine reuptake inhibitor, and there is a little chance of sexual dysfunction, but the difficulty with this medicine is that it is more epileptogenic. So epileptic type symptoms may occur, and if one is prone then it will occur. Similarly, under SNRI, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors, venlafaxine is one example. It is less epileptogenic and it has lower sexual dysfunction side effect, but it requires frequent dosing because of low half life and may increase diastolic blood pressure also. So, we always prescribe medicine by taking the cost benefit analysis. What is the cost of the medicine, what harm the medicines are going to produce, and what is the benefit. If benefit is far far higher than the cost, then we prescribe the medicines. Now there are mixed reuptake inhibitors in the atypical class. These mixed reuptake inhibitors include such pharmacological agents that act on both sides of the synapse, that is, at presynaptic site and postsynaptic sites, and include several agents. One example is nefazodone. It is analogous to trazodone. At presynaptic level, nefazodone work like SNRI, means serotonin non-epinephrine reuptake inhibitor. And at postsynaptic level, it works as serotonin antagonist. This requires frequent dosing as half-life is generally 2 to 4 hours. Side effects include nausea, somnolence, dry mouth, and headache. Again, there is one typo, it is mouth. Advantages: that low chance of drug induced sexual dysfunction and it is less lethal. Another mixed reuptake inhibitors is mirtazapine. It is analogous to tetracyclic drug menserine. At presynaptic level, it is alpha 2 adrenergic autoreceptor blocker. And at postsynaptic level, it is 5-HT3 antagonist. So these mixed reuptake inhibitors and the other atypical agents like SNRI and DNRI, they are atypical because their mode of action is not very well known. They work in different ways to produce the antidepressant effects. So thanks a lot. In the next and final lecture on this series, I will cover mood stabilizers and psychostimulants. See you soon. Thank you very much. Hope you all are safe and healthy.